Le cinéma public aimerait remercier Emma Seligman, la réalisatrice de Shiva Baby, ainsi que Dara Moats, la fondatrice et programmatrice de cELLEuloid, pour l'organisation de cette discussion virtuelle et pour votre collaboration. La discussion sera disponible sur notre site web au cinémapublic.ca ainsi que sur nos plateformes sociales. Bonne discussion! Cinema Public would like to thank Emma Seligman, director of Shiva Baby, as well as Dara Moats, founder and programmer of cELLEuloid, for organizing this virtual Q&A. The discussion will be available on our website at cinemapublic.ca, as well as on our social platforms. Have a nice discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dara, as she mentioned, the founder and programmer for cELLEuloid, which is a screening series in Montreal of films directed by women. So we're welcoming Emma Seligman to here today to talk about her film Shiva Baby. And so we're very excited. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about it. And I've been waiting so long to screen the film since I've seen it. I love it so much.
Thank you.
So my first question is, the film takes place like in a very specific place and culture and time, but it's so specific that it becomes universal again. So I just wanted to know, like, even though I'm not from a Jewish community, it just, there was still so much I related to in her. Do you want to speak to that and how you used your own experiences writing it, and also sort of the positives and negatives of you directly using your own experiences in your work?
Definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. I think that I just wanted to write as authentically from my experience in my community as possible, because it's the only one that I know, or it's the one that I know the best, even out of, my other communities, like my school community or, anything else. I feel like I can write my family the best. And I had producers and, team members on the movie who weren't Jewish. So I kept waiting for someone to tell me like, this feels too specific, or I don't understand this or that, but no one said anything. So I feel like I just kept hoping that someone would speak up if they felt like it wasn't working. And the movie's based off a short film. And even though the short was 7 minutes and not, as long as this, no one said that about the short. And I thankfully got that comment as well, that it felt kind of universal. So that made me feel really good. And I sort of just went with that going into the feature. The pros of writing from my own experience or like my community are great, because it makes it easy to write. I'm trying to think if there's any cons. I don't really think there's any cons to write what you know what I mean, as they say. So it worked out for me, I think.
So it was a short. So when you turn a short into a feature, like what extra layers do you explore to grow it?
In the story?
Yeah. And just in general, like how do you add to the...
Yeah, well, it was hard because it takes place in one day, and I kept the same sort of framework. So I wanted to expand on Danielle and her relationship with her mom, and then I wanted to add the character of Maya, played by Molly Gordon. But it was tricky because I wanted to expand in a lot of ways, but I didn't want it to feel slapstick or like it got so crazy, because I still needed it to be one day, and I wanted it to feel somewhat believable that all this stuff was happening in one day. I feel like I kept saying to myself, like, how much can I get away with at a Shiva, at a family, at a public family event? So it was tricky. I think I just wanted to make sure that I think the thing that became the driving force of expanding it was Danielle's anxiety and her insecurities, and those sort of driving her to make the choices and steps that she takes within the film. And that's sort of like biting her in the ass. So I think that became the sort of way I could add all the layers. It's just Danielle being more anxious and sort of trying to like save herself and hold on to anything.
It's really good use of location too, because even though it takes place in the one, like you have the van, you have the backyard, you still like expanded the world as much as you could, which
Thank
I thought
you.
was really great as well. I love the tension in the film because it is, even though it's a comedy, it's the cringe comedy, so it is very anxiety inducing. And so it's kind of a similar tone to even a horror movie. And were you influenced by any horror movies, or did you watch any beforehand?
Um, I watched, I didn't, but I watched a psychological thriller horror movie called Krisha because that takes place in one day in one house. It's Trey Edward Schultz's first film. He went on to make It Comes at Night and Waves, and he's just awesome. So I kept looking at that film and saying, like, how did they accomplish it? It's not a comedy, but it's about this woman losing her mind at a Thanksgiving, and it's awkward, and her family's estranged. And nothing happens, but it's a horror movie or thriller. So I was inspired by that. And then once I had that as a guiding force, I went to like other thriller, like anxiety inducing, like anxiety thrillers like Black Swan and a couple Cassavetes movies, that just feel claustrophobic and tight, even though like no one's dying. But then by the end of the film, when I was working with our composer and I was telling her the sounds I wanted and she was showing me what she could do, she basically just said, "Oh, so you want a horror score?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess." But I didn't really grow up on horror movies. I mean, I like them, but I'm not like one of those like horror movie like stans. It wasn't really clear to me that it was a horror movie till the end, and I was like, "Oh, I can see that." Yeah.
Yeah, comedy and horror has sort of the same structure a little bit, build and then release tension. So they are
Yes,
very similar. Yeah.
that's such a good point. They do. Yeah.
Um, do you want to talk about, I'm also interested, the casting is so amazing in the film, and it's your first feature and you have this stacked cast of great character actors. And so I just wanted to talk about the process of casting everyone and how that changes the film as people join.
Yeah, totally. We worked with an incredible casting director, Kate Geller, and she just helped us. She's her field, and we didn't have a lot of money for the movie, but it felt important to us that we had a casting director, because we don't know how to communicate with like agents and managers, and everyone was my age, and we were just like, ah. So we just sent offers to people. Rachel Sennett stayed from the short film, which felt really important to me. She plays Danielle, but
She's
we
great.
just, yeah,
She
she's,
adds so much to it. She's really, really amazing.
yeah, she's very special. She's incredible. So, but she's relatively unknown, at least she's a comedian, and I think people know her from her Twitter, but less from her acting career. So it felt important to us that we get other people to stack it up. And we just sent offers to people and everyone said yes, or they would say they were interested and then meet me and get coffee to make sure I was like a normal person and then say yes. And yeah, everyone altered it. Everyone made it their own. Polly Draper, especially, who plays the mom, like I feel like she kept on bringing and wanting to push for this arc that the mom finds out what's going on. And I didn't want the mom, I wanted the mom to be oblivious. And I think her and I met in the middle because I felt like I understood she wanted to feel not stupid, like she was sensing something was going on. But I was like, she's not going to figure out that her daughter's a sugar baby. Like that's not happening today. So yeah, every actor made it somewhat their own and brought a lot to it for sure.
Great casting. I also just wanted to ask, I recently heard that Jodie Foster said she makes all her films about male failure. And I was just wondering if there's a theme. I know, it's so great.
That's awesome.
Is there a theme in Shiva Baby that you want to continue to explore, or are you moving on in the next?
I don't know. I think I might, I don't know. We'll see. I think the theme I was trying to explore is sort of like the like impossible like hunger for male validation, or like how realizing you're limited, how limited your sexual power is as a young woman when you otherwise feel powerless. And I think I just try to, Rachel and I always talked about how Danielle's just trying to hold on to her power, and then she gets it and she uses it, and it's all sexual, obviously. So I think I was just trying to explore sexual power dynamics when you're a young woman and you're just like running at walls and you just don't know
Yeah.
what you're doing. I feel like though I might eventually want to move on from that. I'm interested in telling probably a couple more stories from there, but it's personal. So, you know, as I
Yeah.
think it's sort of a universal or almost universal thing for even just young people in general. So, you know, I'm sort of would like to move past that time in my life when it affected me that
Okay.
way.
Um, yeah, it's very, I think it's not explored a lot in like romantic sort of the power dynamic between women and women. So I really love that. And I think it's, I mean, I felt very universal to me, yeah, to try to work your sexuality and power in the, and when you think you have so much as it, and it goes in a second, for
Yes,
male
yes,
validation, if that's what you're looking for, it's very hard to keep it. Yeah. And
yeah.
I think that especially in romantic movies, that's not explored a lot. And so I really love that about it as
Thank
well. So
you.
um what so you already talked about this a little bit, but I'm just, if you wanted to expand about like, I love films too that take place in one specific time period, like one
Mhm.
night. They're really popular when I grew up in the 80s, and I think they've fallen out of fashion a little bit, not too much, but
Mhm.
um, and so do you want to talk about how you evolve the storyline a little bit more when you have such a limited time and space?
Yeah, I think the other movies I watched in addition to Krisha were either 1 day or 3 days. A lot of them were funeral or family gathering kind of movies. Like I rewatched Rachel Getting Married, and that's very cringeworthy and tense and awkward, and claustrophobic in the way that it's shot, but also the story. And then August Osage County, and then like Death at a Funeral, and uh there were and woman under the influence. And yeah, I think I couldn't see any other way. I didn't want to like allow her to breathe. You know, I felt like I needed to have her having this nervous breakdown. So I felt like if I took her out of the house, all that tension, you know, for too long, she does leave the house at certain points with at the side or in the back. But if she left permanently, I felt like it would relieve all that tension.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think that it was I think it's all blurred at this point because I'm like, ugh, I don't remember when I did what, but I think that it just felt important to me that every dynamic was established and every dynamic felt well rounded, but everything was also making Danielle's day worse, whether these characters were trying to or not. So yeah, I just sort of wanted it to be like death by a thousand cuts, and just have it be like a domino effect on her of like a, house of cards falling. So I don't know. I feel like, but I felt like I was running out. I was like, oh my God, how else much can we do? And then even when we were in the edit and we were like, oh, this sentence or this entire little moment isn't dealing with us, isn't working. I mean, the movie's only an hour and 11 minutes, so I couldn't do much more than that. It's not that long. So
I love
yeah.
the length, really helps like amp up everything. It was a great choice, I think, too, because it's
Thank you.
so quick and like, yeah. But it doesn't feel that short when you're in it because of all of it, everything happening, and so many relationships and the same exploding kind of at the same
Totally.
time.
Thank you.
Did you always want to be a filmmaker, or did it happen sort of as a surprise to you?
I always knew I wanted to work in film or around film. Both my parents are big film buffs, but they're not in the industry. I wanted to be a film critic for a really long time. As a kid, I thought that's what I was going to do. And I had like a little movie blog, and, I would go to TIFF every year and write reviews and stuff like that. And then eventually I started directing in high school, and I really liked working with actors. This was theater though. Sorry, I'm getting a call. Okay, I'm gonna pick that up again. This sentence. Um, yeah, I thought I wanted to be a film critic for a really long time, and I had a blog where I wrote movie reviews, and I went to TIFF every year. And then I started directing theater in high school, and I really liked working with actors. And at the same time, I joined the high school committee at TIFF. It's called TIFF Next Wave. And it was an incredible group of kids. Our job was to, bring kids into TIFF and plan events for high school students and, our own festival. But through it, I got to meet a lot of young filmmakers, either in high school at the art schools in Toronto, or who were in first or second year university at Ryerson. And I never understood anything about how to make films, and just watching these kids make shorts with their friends and running around, I really opened my eyes up to that it's not that impossible to get a camera in your hand and just make something with your friends. So yeah, and so then when it came down to university and where I wanted to go to school, that's when I sort of had to make the decision of well, what do I really, as it always is for people, what do I want to explore and invest in. So that's when I sort of made the okay, I'm going to try filmmaking, but at that point, a lot of things had been swirling around before I sort of made that decision.
Amazing. And so just because we screen films directed by women, so I was just wondering if you have any advice you kind of touched on it a little bit, but other female filmmakers about how to get started, or any tips you've had now that you have your first feature under your belt that you wish you knew?
I think just it comes down to faking confidence, especially as a Canadian woman, in the US, trying to get financing here. We raised this money entirely from people who'd never invested in film before. We had one EP, her name is Rhiannon Jones. She's incredible, and she gives $50K to first or second time female filmmakers, but she's this rarity. We were searching and searching for, I guess it was only 2 years, but between all, it was me and my 3 producers and Rachel, and between all of us, we had interned for so many production companies and, movie places, and none of them, these established places, wanted to help us. I mean, they gave us advice and they were helpful in connecting us to people they tried, but they didn't want to make the movie, in the way where you're I feel in Canada, it's all through telefilm and the grant system, and that's great. But, if, I don't know, I was living in the US and I got my visa and I sort of stayed there. So that's how we were doing it. And eventually you started having to be shameless. And basically between the 5 of us, we just reached out to everybody we all knew in our lives that we'd ever met before. We started with the ones that we thought had money, or connections to people who had money. And then from there, it just, even down to the wire, we were asking just for we sent out a PayPal. It wasn't a Kickstarter, but we were we have a week, we still need to raise $10,000, and we're so close, and just sent it out. So I would just say to all filmmakers, just be absolutely shameless, but especially for female filmmakers, you just have to, I really had to get over my Canadian womanhoodness and just just put on my, I don't even know what I did. I just figured it out. And I think understanding how the process, which is, I'm not a math person, but understanding how the waterfall works in terms of just vaguely in terms of what happens when investors give you their money, where does it go into the pot, and then how does it eventually come back to them, if it does come back to them. And I think the more I learned about that, the easier it was for me to feel confident when I was talking to someone who wasn't in film that I was trying to get to invest. But I'd just say for all filmmakers, but including women, just the best thing you can do to finance your movies or to go into it is to make a movie for a small budget. It doesn't have to be one day, one location. You can figure out another way to do it. But the small in scope can be really helpful budget wise, but also I think as your first feature, I don't know if I could have handled more than one house. Once we got to the sugar daddy's apartment, which was the only one day at the end, I was I'm not used to this. I'd sort of been able to focus on all my other skills once the house was already sort of figured out, So yeah, I just all that stuff. But I think it's just about just really faking it and just sort of going hard, and also having friends and collaborators that are going to help hold you accountable to your goals. Because I had that definitely, and people checking and being where's that draft? And it was all self-imposed. There was no producer that's make the movie, I gave you my money. It was all just us, my producers and Rachel telling me okay, you're gonna give it to us on Friday and we're gonna read it and XYZ. So yeah, all that. I just listed off a lot, but
no, I've never heard the financing answer before. That's really interesting. how do you hold yourself accountable when you're writing, or when there's no, you're just doing it for yourself before, I think that's a thing a lot of people struggle with.
I think have a collaborator that's equally invested as you are. For me, that was Rachel Sennett. I continue to tell people this because I really don't know if I would have made it without her. We were in the short together. I directed her in the short, and then she was like, well, what are your weekly and monthly goals to accomplish this feature? And I was like, I don't have any. And then she became my best friend. We like started working it out. And she was really invested in having, she was invested in me and in me getting my first film, but also she was invested in like having her first feature starring opportunity. And she's incredibly ambitious and smart. So I think, if you know a producer you're friends with a producer and you both are very close, or an actor, or I don't know, even a DP or a DOP, like you both are like, I want to make my first feature, like we need to make it happen, and it's going to do this for us, it's going to put us on the mark, or whatever it is your goal is. I think aim so high, because I always say, like, if you aim super, super high, you're going to fall in the middle. But if you aim in the middle, you're going to fall closer to the bottom. So I think that I think that's also not a so Canadian thing. Is we're like, oh, like, well, we'll try to make a movie. And I feel like you just have to sort of be like, no, it's going to win every Indie Spirit Award, or like whatever your thing is. We weren't nominated for the Indie Spirits. But so like I said that, and I feel like that helped me like aim super high. So I think finding someone that's like equally invested as you, where the two of you can come to each other. And I had that with my producers too. It just started with Rachel, and then the sort of team started building out from there. But I felt like I could go to her or them if I was like, especially once it's self-imposed, I was like, we're not going to raise the money, and we all had each other to be like, we're going to do it. So yeah, so people you trust and are invested in your idea.
That's one of the special things about film as an art form, is how collaborative it is too. So it's very interesting.